parents say, well, my kids, there's other benefits. They become independent. They learn how to set their alarm clock on their own, and they have friends. There's a social. I said, wait, time out. If you are thinking about spending $100K plus for your kid to learn how to adult and to have friends, I can't, I'm in a different conversation. I'm not even in that universe. I'm talking about actually going to college for what it was intended, either the required path of going into a career or the logical path of preparing and gaining career readiness. If we're talking about that, then the ideas of the benefits of adulting or socialization, those are great, but that's not why you go.
Welcome to the Smart College Buyer Podcast. My mission is to help high school families pay for college without taking on a truckload of debt. Each episode, I'll share insights into college admissions, financial aid, payment strategies, and more, often with expert guests. I'm Jack Wang, your host. I started helping families after struggling to navigate the process myself for my sons. If I needed help, I knew others did too. Let's dive in. Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of the Smart College Buyer Podcast. I'm your host as always, Jack Wang. Today I'm really excited, and I hope you are too, because I have my friend and special guest, Jay Dusold of the Life After 12 program, or Life After 12th, I should say, mispronounced that. And the reason I'm excited is because it's something that I truly think and also a lot of parents truly think that's probably really important, but we probably don't think about it enough before we start thinking about college. And so what Jay, I'm going to talk a little bit about what Jay does in his bio here, but I'm super excited to talk to him about this because as an adult, it took me a while to figure this out because I didn't have a program or I wasn't aware of a program that's kind of like this. And so Jay is no stranger to what he does today, having gone through life early on, and going through college really without a direction. And then when he had his son, he found that his son suffered from kind of the same thing of sort of the typical not knowing what to do and not necessarily having a clear indication of what his future career might be, which I'm sure that if you're listening to this podcast and you have a high school student, that's probably not uncommon. So in 2014, Jay left a 25-year career to work with teens to help them find their passion and their career calling. So he created the True Fit Career Guidance System that reveals a teen's career DNA and routes them to jobs that match how they are wired for work, right? And so his motivational speaking and coaching take him all over the world to help young people reach their full potential and avoid the waste of time and money and the stress and the frustration of getting it wrong. And again, I know, having gone through a couple of different careers, I've had to unfortunately live this before I finally found the thing that I'm truly passionate about and how I like to work. So Jay, welcome to the podcast. So great to have you on today.
Yeah, Jack, thank you so much for being here. As you said, this is kind of a passion area of mine. I enjoy working with young people, helping them reach their full potential. And I'm looking forward to being on the show today. Thanks for having me as a guest.
Yeah, and Jay, just as a note for our listeners, so you're actually based out of York, Pennsylvania, and right before we started recording, you mentioned that it is home of the York Peppermint Patty, right? Yes. Candy. Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. So Jay, tell us a little bit about your professional background and where you went to college, and most importantly, did you ever expect to be doing this today? As you look back, would you have, let me rephrase that. Would you have ever expected to be doing this today based on what you were doing back then?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, so actually, my first experience with being confused about career direction happened when I was a freshman in college, actually. Like most high school students, have kind of felt that pressure to go to college after high school, but I didn't know really what I was doing. And so I picked a major, and I happened to like exterior spaces of buildings and interior design. I just enjoyed that, looking at buildings and looking at design. And so, of course, if you like looking at buildings and interior design, you're going to go be an architect.
Right, exactly.
I chose that, major. And Jack, it was very shortly thereafter that I realized, oh my gosh, this is definitely not for me. And I can remember that day very vividly. I was sitting at a cold, drab green drafting table in my class, and everyone else left. And I just sat there saying, man, like, can I ever be awesome somewhere? This is not what I thought. And I don't know how to actually figure out what would be a good fit for me. So I actually hit a pretty dark season in my own life of feeling that anxiety and kind of feeling depressed about not knowing what to do, and just wondering, if am I ever really going to amount to anything? And so I bumped around with some different majors, and eventually I actually became a minister. And it happened to be that work was actually a really good fit for me. I know that now, looking back, because I understand myself. But it was actually a great fit, and I was a minister for 25 years before leaving to, as you said, work with young people.
Right. And that's exactly sort of what I'm talking about, right? Is that for many parents, and myself included, what we started off doing, what we thought we were going to be doing for the rest of our lives, quote unquote, right, is totally, different than what we end up doing. And so, yeah, it's a long way from being an architect, right, looking at buildings and designing buildings, interior design, to being a minister now, really in a different way, ministering or coaching and guiding young people through this process, right? Totally different skill set, obviously. But I know that, and when we spoke before getting on, that this is truly your passion. But I also want to be clear that what you do in the Life After 12th program, and we'll talk about that in just a moment, but it's not just for kids going to college, right? It's really for anybody, any young person, and quite frankly, I'm sure that there's many adults who would probably want to benefit from this program also.
Yeah, Jack, when I started doing the work with students, I had parents say to me, like, on the side, hey, I still don't have it figured out. Can this help me? And I wound up launching adult work, and I do take on adult clients. I don't really advertise it because, again, my interest is to really work with young people so that they can reach their full potential right out of the chute and not waste time, money, or effort guessing and getting it wrong. So I do work with adult clients, but that's not really what I focus on. And yeah, it is not only for students who want to go to college. Kind of the whole program and the whole philosophy, the whole message of what I do is to basically say, let's first understand how a young person is wired for work, and then let's choose options that really honor that design and honor their wiring, and would be a great choice because that position will prove to be successful and motivating and fulfilling. And that position may or may not require a degree. So we kind of make the whole, should I go to college, a secondary question, and make sure that that choice for some type of preparation is really serving the goal of that verifiable career fit that we can find.
Right. And that makes sense because not everyone needs to or should go to college. And certainly not everyone who wants to go to college are necessarily emotionally ready to go right away, right after high school. I mean, I certainly have friends who, and I know children who probably are better served by taking a little time off of working or taking a gap year or whatever the case may be. Not because they're not smart or whatever, just, they're not quite emotionally ready for it. But let's focus on the ones who are going to college, because after all, this is the Smart College Buyer podcast. I think one thing that parents are sometimes confused about, and I see this on like social media posts and things like that, where if your child is going into a STEM type of field or like a pre-med or pre-law type of thing, the career path is pretty well, not necessarily well defined, but it's much more visible, right? Hey, if you're going to major in engineering, you're probably going to be an engineer. But for a lot of college majors, a communications major, an English major, a history major, or some of these other majors where the career path is not quite as visible because those majors can go into so many different things, right? So how often, in the work that you do, how often do kids sort of identify the major or I'm sorry, identify the career path if they're going into those particular majors? Like, and how does that line up, I guess, is really my question, right? For kids who, let's say, want to major in English.
Yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, I do see that quite a bit. So in my work, we always start first with understanding how the young person is wired for work. I call this career DNA, and there's about 4 or 5 facets of their inner essence that constitute how they're wired for work. It's real, it's present, it's active in every single young person right now. And so that's so important to discover first. Once we discover that inner wiring, then we can actually find specific positions. And this is very important to think about identifying a fit at a position level, not at a more general career field level, but at a very specific position level. Why? Because to your point, there could be a general field that has so many specific jobs and they could vary enough from each other where some would be a good fit, but others wouldn't be. And so we always try to, focus on the fit at a position level. Once we understand and can see that, then a young person says, well, what's the best path toward actually preparing for this? Now, some paths are mapped out. You don't really have a choice. And there are, courses to take or a particular major that you have to actually focus on. But we always say that the education is serving the destination. And so we don't start with having students think about picking majors without first having a verifiable career fit identified. Then they can have a much clearer choice as far as what's the best major that will either be required or would be the wisest decision to make that would actually be the most productive and beneficial as far as getting career readiness for that position.
Right. And so that actually makes a ton of sense because, a lot of, or I should say, oftentimes parents will think about college in terms of a return on investment sense, right? Or the goal of college is so that their kid can get a good job after graduation. And you're right, some fields require certain things, right? Like if you're going to be a doctor, you're probably pretty limited in what majors you're going to pursue to start off, right? So, I think I know the answer to this, but I don't want to assume, but how often then through your work do you find that kids end up changing their majors, right? They might start off your program saying, well, I'm going to be this major, but then by the time they're done, they're in a totally different direction. How often does that happen?
Well, usually I get my clients, I work with them early in the process. So, I normally have clients if they've graduated high school and they're in college, they're seeking me out because they don't know what to do and the path they've been on is not working, and they can see that this is really not the ideal trajectory as far as career direction is concerned. So 100% of my clients who've done college are changing it up and are realizing it's not working. Now, when we zoom out of my own clients and we look at the body of students, the statistics are really alarming as far as in some institutions, up to 80% of college freshmen will change their majors multiple times. 57% of college students take 6 years to complete a traditional 4-year degree, and 72% graduate and get a job unrelated to their earned major. Right? And those are published statistics. So, regardless of my own anecdotal evidence of my clients that I work with, the statistics that are published really paint a picture, an alarming picture of young people that start college, many of them feeling that pressure. They really don't have a verifiable career fit in mind. And then they start down a path and they realize quickly that this isn't it. Exactly as I did when I started that journey myself. When my oldest son, who's now 24, when he went off to undergraduate, because we did have a verifiable fit for him and it required a degree, Jack, it was crazy. He landed at Penn State University, and he used to call me regularly early on and say, Dad, you got to come here and talk to my friends, because they were in this major and they had their first quiz and they did poorly and they ran down to the office and changed their major. Right? They changed their major over a poor performance on a quiz. Why were they doing that? And I'm telling you, this was regularly. And what was happening, Jack, was they were realizing, this particular subject that's a critical piece of the trajectory I'm on as far as career destination, this content is not what I thought, and it's difficult, and I actually really don't like it. And so I want to go change my major so I can get away from this emphasis as far as content is concerned. So I see it all of the time. It's a real plague. It's a concern, because it does wind up delaying that graduation, and then many times just, finishing the preparation and never really utilizing it, because they realize at some point along the way, this is not really a good career fit for me.
What you're saying there reminds me a lot about what I hear from parents, right? I think the exception are the ones who are in STEM fields where they're now an engineer or an engineering manager or something, or like a manager in an engineering firm, so their undergraduate degree might have been in engineering. So they really followed that path. Doesn't mean they like it, right? They might have had a good career. It doesn't mean they actually enjoyed it. That's a whole different ballgame. But, I hear from parents regularly that, hey, what I do today has nothing to do with what I actually studied in college, right? I mean, I hear that all the time. Yeah. And then kind of what you're saying about students changing majors, when I was at University of Texas, I was a finance major. I actually went in knowing what I want to do, and I'm still in finance. So that makes me kind of odd in some ways, right? Especially based on what we're talking about. But I will tell you that it was like a running joke, right? Like we would have I would have friends who are like engineering majors or natural science majors, like chemistry or physics or something. And more often than not, you would see them change majors because the coursework is hard, number one. Not that they weren't smart, but it was hard. And number two, just because they could do it didn't necessarily mean that they enjoyed it. So, there was this path of like going from like a physics major to something else, to like a business major, to like a communications major, and then they ultimately graduate with like an advanced shoe tying degree, right? It was what kids today call like a meme, right? It was like a joke, but it happens so often. And I have friends where that happened, right? They're great people and they're very successful in their careers, but it was like a joke, like it was like expected to happen, So it's a huge thing, right? And so I think that what you do is incredible because it helps find people sort of what they're really good at and what they actually enjoy. So speaking of that, I want to kind of jump ahead in a question here, but at what point should parents really think about this for their student, right? Because I think about the typical college process. A lot of colleges, when they're applying, they have to put down a major, right? Or they think that they have to put down a major. So obviously they can't do this right before they apply to college, I would imagine, because they got to put something down. But when should parents get their kids into something like this?
Yeah, it's a great question. And parents ask me that exact question. They're like, hey, what's the ideal age for my kid to start working with you? And I always tell parents it's not really a decision based on age. It has to be a decision based on whether or not the student wants to figure it out. Okay, because we all know that there are direct links between ownership and motivation, ownership and diligence, ownership and follow through, right? And so I always tell parents, your kids will not pursue a career future they don't own. And that's true for anything. We all know as parents, how many times do we have to ask our kids to do household chores, and remind them, and they don't take initiative, and they maybe start them, and then we have to remind them to finish them. Why? Because it's not something they really own. It's something that we're asking them to do.
I think as parents, we all know that all too well, right? And as kids, we did the same things to our parents, right?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's normal. It's totally normal. So I always encourage parents, the student really has to want to figure this out because, there's work involved and there's things that they are going to have to apply themselves to in order to really, get the outcome. And so I always, encourage parents, hey, it really should be a decision based on whether or not they have an interest and a desire to figure this out, to get a verifiable fit, meaning a position that they can see actually aligns with how they're wired for work. Which what it does, Jack, is it actually empowers young people to be super excited, because they know there's a verifiable fit at the end of whatever preparation path they need to be on. When there's challenge, when there's difficulty, knowing that there's a great fit waiting for them is often a factor that gives them that drive, allows them to overcome some of those difficulties because they have a clarity and confidence that if I can push through the preparation, there's a great fit waiting for me on the other end. In fact, I have a client, Hope. She was from 2015. I circled back around her last year to say, hey, you got on a path we identified as a fit. Was it? Did you get into it? How'd it work out? And it was so interesting, Jack, because she said to me, you know, one of the great things about having a verifiable fit before I started college was knowing that when I hit those difficult parts in the study and those difficult seasons, I had more desire to push through them because I knew what I was doing wasn't going to wind up being wasted. I knew that what I was going to do wasn't going to ultimately, be something I walked away from. And so knowing it fit gave me that determination. It gave me the encouragement to actually stick with it and put into work because I knew it would be an actual fit when I got there. And that's super encouraging for a young person to see that. One of the reasons I think they struggle so much is they don't know if what they've chosen is going to pan out. And so they just get discouraged and they're like, they're wondering, is it worth the time, money, and effort? Is it worth it? Or am I going to walk away from this? Because the stats say and evidence shows that a majority of young people do. And so they don't want that happening to them. So they're not sure. And when you're not sure and confident, you don't put in what you would be putting in if you were sure and confident.
Right. And that makes total sense. And I want to go back to something you said earlier about when kids should go into this program. And I think you make a really great point. I think that's true for adults as well as kids for almost anything, right? Like you can give someone advice, but if they're not open to hearing it, they're not going to take it, right? In one ear and out the other. Much like as parents, when you ask your kid to like take out the trash, right? Oftentimes it just seems like it's in one ear and out the other, right? So I totally get that. And that makes a ton of sense. So when people are thinking about the finding the right fit and finding that career DNA and stuff, what are some questions that you wish parents and students would ask, but often don't ask?
Oh, wow. That's a great question. So there's two parts of figuring out fits. One is understanding how the young person is actually wired for work. The other part is thoroughly understanding the career position. Those are the two parts. So I think the best, like most actionable thing I can share today with the listening audience is on the side of really understanding thoroughly what the career position involves, because that's something, regardless of whether or not you can really figure out your own wiring and all that stuff, knowing the position fully would save so many people a regretful decision. All right. So basically, Jack, here's what I wish every parent would ask, and encourage their kid to ask. So when they're thinking about a career position, I wish they would ask the question, what is actually involved? Okay, because what happens is so many young people make a decision to pursue a particular career path with a fraction of the information they should really know beforehand. Okay. And I always say young people will spend more time researching a prom dress or their first car than they will their future career.
Yeah, that's totally true. That's
crazy. True. Right. It's crazy because when you think of the ramifications, the implications of making a poor choice about your career future, it's like a much more weighty decision than a prom dress or a first car. So asking that question, what's really involved? There's 4 ways to answer that question. And it's basically what I have come to call job anatomy. Every single job position can be broken down into 4 simple categories. Number 1, the required duties. Number 2, the substance, meaning what would you be working with, on, or through in this position, the subjects, the topics, the objects. Number 3, the environment. What is it like to actually do the work? Is it stressful? Is it relaxed? Is it upfront, behind the scenes? Is it by myself? Is it on a team? Like, what is the environment like in which the work unfolds? And then the 4th thing every job has is a primary outcome. So if you're an elementary school teacher, the outcome is passing on knowledge to children. If you're a welder, the outcome is repairing or fabricating some device that's going to be useful in society. But just thinking about a job in those 4 categories is extremely helpful, believe it or not, and can save people a lot of wasted time, money, and effort. And so when you're a kid, or maybe you as a parent are thinking about a position for your child, just say, wait a minute, what's actually involved? I need to think about that through 4 lenses. What are the duties? What is the substance? What is the environment? What is the outcome? And just by doing some basic research and filling in the blanks in all 4 of those quadrants, you will be much more ahead, and you will be much more likely to make a decision that, will prove to be an okay decision, because you've thought through all the pieces, and then you're reflecting and picturing whether or not all those pieces are something that you could really do well and would actually enjoy doing. But it's so important, Jack, to get a holistic understanding of the position. Again, most young people, they'll make a decision like I did with architecture based on an activity. Oh, like connecting or orienting myself toward like buildings and structure. That's like one sliver in only one of the quadrants, right? Or the classic one I use is when kids say, man, I really like animals. Well, animals falls into the content, right? It's what you'd be working with on or through, but that's only one sliver in that quadrant. And we're not even thinking about the other 3 quadrants, which are equally important, right? So again, we can't let our kids make decisions to pursue career positions based on a small fraction, either knowing about one activity in the position or knowing about one topic in the position. We need to think holistically about the job before we make a decision.
And I would imagine that I'm sure that there are plenty of parents who now listening to this podcast realize they probably should have done that research before they got into the job that they're currently in, right? What are some of the biggest misconceptions that you encounter about from parents or students about picking a career or picking a major? Is it what you just said, or are there other things that you commonly run into?
Yeah, there are a few that parents often share with me. I would say number one misconception is my child really can't know what they should do being so young. Now, I know that's kind of like, pop culture stuff. It's not true. It's just absolutely not true. So yes, your child at age 14, 15, 16, 17, they are old enough to really actually know the types of things they should be doing, and they can actually identify a verifiable fit. It's possible. So that's number one. The second biggest thing that I often encounter with parents is they say, well, they'll just go to college and they'll eventually figure it out. They'll always be better off at least just going. That is not true anymore. Jack, you see this, I'm sure, in your work. That was true 20 years ago. That is not true now. Now, parents will argue with me on this. They'll get really defensive. Some of your listeners might be hating me right now. But parents say, well, my kids, there's other benefits. They become independent. They learn how to set their alarm clock on their own, and they have friends. There's a social. I said, wait, time out. If you are thinking about spending $100K plus for your kid to learn how to adult and to have friends, I can't, I'm in a different conversation. I'm not even in that universe. I'm talking about actually going to college for what it was intended, either the required path of going into a career or the logical path of preparing and gaining career readiness. If we're talking about that, then the ideas of the benefits of adulting or socialization, those are great, but that's not why you go. And so the second big thing is parents just assuming that college is always going to be a great choice, right? And I've come to say this, Jack, about running off to college or any preparation path without a verifiable fit. This is how I say it. Who purchases a plane ticket without first knowing where the conference is? I mean, who would do that? No one would do that, right? But that's exactly what we do when we send kids off to college, right? We don't know the destination. We don't know like what kind of life work really fits. That would be a fantastic decision for them that will give them success and motivation and fulfillment. We don't know that destination, but we give them, we make them buy a ticket to somewhere, and we're just kind of hoping it's going to work out, right? And that to me is just absolutely crazy to think that we do that. So I think those are the two biggest things. It's not possible to actually know, and then, oh well, college is always going to be a great option.
Right. You know, and I've heard those points as well, and certainly around like the adulting and the socialization aspect. And I do agree that college can be useful for those things, but you're right, like to pay $100,000, or at the most expensive colleges now, you're really looking across 4 years at over $300,000 to figure that's a lot of money to pay for your kid to learn how to be an adult. Right. I'm not saying it's not valuable lesson, but you know, the return on investment on that might not quite be there. So, so Jay, we have time for one last question here, and I'd like to ask you to share maybe some examples of students, and you mentioned that student previously, but some examples of where students maybe started out in one particular direction. They came in strongly in one particular direction, but then after working with you, they're in a totally different direction. Can you just share some success stories, basically?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to. So one particular standing out, and you actually mentioned engineering. So Michael, one of my clients, he came to me after he'd graduated and was in a very coveted position. He was an engineer, and he had this awesome job with a military contractor. It was amazing income, great benefits. It was a coveted position. And Michael reached out to me. He was in his early 20s, and he said, hey, like, I am absolutely miserable. And I mean, this was a particularly serious case. Like, he would literally have mental breakdowns on Sunday night in thinking about showing up for work on Monday morning. How did Michael get there? Why did he choose engineering? Because he was really good at math and he loved tinkering with things. He would take apart Nerf guns and modify Nerf guns when he was 11 and 12. And of course, if you like tinkering with things and you're good at math, of course you must be destined to be an engineer, right? And so all the people in his life all pushed him. And he did well. He was a bright guy. He graduated top of his class. He did really well. But once he got into the actual position, you see, other parts. Remember, there's 4 quadrants of job anatomy. Some of the abilities were a good fit for him. Some of the content, you know, in the job was a good fit, but so many elements in the other quadrants, especially the environment things, the things that will trigger and sustain intrinsic motivation, they were totally absent in that job. And so he changed gears. He went through the coaching process. We learned how he's actually wired for work, and he was able to pivot. He's doing something totally different today. He's actually in the process of developing a nonprofit organization that works with young people in sports and through camping in sports. And he's just on a completely different trajectory. He since has left that engineering position to do more schooling, but specifically to prep him for something that we knew would be a great fit. So Michael is probably, a standout client as far as someone that came to me who had been down a path and switched it up. Again, most of my clients are either in high school and we actually avoid all that, or they're, a semester in and things don't work. So their parents pull them and then are like, hey, this didn't work. We don't want to keep going with something that doesn't work. We really want to get a clear answer for direction now. So thankfully, in the work I do, I get to help young people actually avoid that position. But I do have some older ones, and we need to pivot for sure.
Right. And, and that's a great story, right? And that is a tremendous pivot. But, as we talked about at the beginning of the episode, think about the time and the money that was wasted.
Yeah.
Right. Now, you could argue that, okay, he had to figure it out and he had to go through, his process to get to the point where he was open to listening to the coaching program, right? And going through the coaching program. So there is value in that. But I'm sure his parents probably spent, a not small sum of money on his college for engineering to now not do it. Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad. That's a great result. That's a great story. So Jay, thank you so much for this great information. I know I've learned a ton, and and I wish that, even in my own instance, I've gone through a couple of different careers I've had to kind of learn these things along the way, right? The school of hard knocks, if you will, to figure it out. And I wasted a lot of time. And so, so many people talk about, oh, I wish I knew this back then, or I wish I knew this 20 years ago. I wish I knew this 5 years, whatever the case it is. But what you're really saying is if you take a little bit of time to figure it out, then you can know this when early on, right? So
Yes,
awesome.
absolutely.
So for those for listeners, again, thanks for being with us. For those who are interested in the Life After 12th program, Jay's contact information will be in the show notes. But again, many thanks to my special guest, Jay Dusold from York, Pennsylvania, home of the York Peppermint Patty, for doing great work in helping our next generation figure out what they're truly passionate about and what they're actually good at doing. So, Jay, thanks so much for being on the show. And listeners, thanks for listening to this episode of the Smart College Buyer Podcast. We'll see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Smart College Buyer Podcast. I hope you found the information useful for your family. Follow me on LinkedIn for more episodes, videos, and tips. The link is in the show notes. Remember, you can spend time now to plan and strategize, or you can spend more money later. Success in college admissions and financial aid isn't about luck. It's about being intentional. I'm here to help you every step of the way.